Representative Koenig, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about the alcohol shipping bill that passed during the 2020 session. It was one of the things that got done when the pandemic hit and, we kind of had to shut down the session, but this is one of the bills that did get through. So what was the landscape before this bill passed? What was the landscape for alcohol shipment in Kentucky? Were we allowed to ship anything? Were we allowed to receive anything? What were we kind of looking at and how did we get to this bill?
Well, basically, before this bill, we were only allowed to have our small farm wineries were allowed to ship. And that was it. You couldn't ship in anything else. If you went to Napa Valley and like some wine, you were not legally allowed to ship it in. And we left it up to, obviously, people to follow the law. And that, frankly, honestly, doesn't happen quite regularly. There's always people looking to circumvent either having it shipped directly to their house under the guise of it being olive oil or something like that. But up here in Northern Kentucky, there was hardly anyone I spoke with who didn't say, oh, you mean I can stop shipping wine to my office in Cincinnati or to my uncle in Indiana or something like that. So it was just the small farm wineries. In 2019, I want to give credit to Senator Wise, who kind of got the ball rolling when he filed and the Senate passed a bill to allow for all wine to be shipped in and out of the state. And a nice idea, and that is kind of the standard across the country with states, is just wine only. But obviously, we're Kentucky. We have 95% of the world's bourbon and 100% of the bourbon worth drinking. And so just wine only really didn't make any sense from that perspective. In addition to that, we'd spent the last several years working very hard to take out the different rules in within each tier of alcohol sales and across tiers. So we didn't want to allow just wine and nobody else. We've been trying to say, if you make alcohol, you all should have the same amount of privileges. So kudos to Speaker Osborne. He said, let's put together a group. And I mean, as soon as session ended in 2019, we started bringing people together, Speaker Osborne, myself, and Chad McCoy, Whip Chad McCoy from Nelson County. And we began to work on this bill. And we were very fortunate to have former ABC Commissioner Christy Trout on staff. She was instrumental in pretty much writing the bill and making sure that it got in the form it is now. But yeah, so that's how we got here. It was a very, very long process over the past year to get us to this point, but I think it's going to bear a lot of fruit.
So let's talk about what exactly the bill allows then. You kind of touched on bourbon in particular, but is it wine, bourbon, and beer, and like how much and what all is allowed under this bill?
Yes, you can ship in and out alcohol if you're a producer. So if you make it, you'll be able to ship it out, or if you make it, you'll be able to ship it in. And there are limits. The bill for a long time had no limits, and that was one of the compromises I had to make to get it passed. And if I remember correctly, it's 10 cases a month of whatever. So 10 cases of beer, 10 cases of wine, 10 cases of spirits, which probably should get you through the month. And if you need 2, then, get your next door neighbor to order the other 10 cases. But so that's the limits on what can and can't be shipped. And also for the longest time, we had the retailers as well as the distributors were allowed to ship. And again, to get it passed, the retailers and distributors asked to be taken out of the bill. And so it's just producers only.
Okay, so, and you bring up having a certain amount per month. There's a lot that goes into this, especially regulation-wise. So, but most bills that passed in the 2020 session went into law on July 15th this month. So, but it sounds like some of the regulations aren't quite finished for this bill. Is that correct?
Right. Well, the alcohol beverage control filed their proposed regulations, I believe, on July 15th, which is, I mean, the bill is law, but you can't ship without a license, and you can't get a license until the regulations are go through the process. So the process started literally last week, and it's a long process to you got to take public comments, you got to go through the administration regulations review committee, and then it has to come to the committee I chair, licensing and occupations, or co-chair in the interim with Senator Schickel, and then we have to give it its final blessing, and even if we don't, the governor can choose to override that and put it into practice anyway. So it's a long process, and I hope to have it streamlined as much as possible. I've been pushing the administration to get it done as quickly as possible, and I'll be pushing all the folks in Frankfurt who go through this process and deal with it to get it done as quickly as possible.
So, but like you said, it does take a little bit of time. So when can we expect that people can get these types of alcohol shipped directly to their home?
I am hopeful that by the end of the year, we can get this done.
Okay, perfect. So, there were a lot of discussions about the bill throughout the session too, about different groups coming to the table saying they were concerned about how they would receive the alcohol, how you would go ahead and make sure that you were of age, and so on and so forth. So what safeguards were put into the bill to ensure that underage people aren't receiving these shipments and things along those lines, just to ensure safety too?
Sure, you can't leave the package at the door like we're used to with Amazon and others. Someone has to physically sign for it. That person has to prove that they're 21 and receive it. Obviously, these folks who are going to be selling, they'll have software that can check and make sure that the person who's ordering it is also 21. And you will not be able to ship to a dry territory, at least not legally. And we're not going to leave that up to the common carrier. It is going to be on you, the individual, to not break the law and try to have something shipped to a dry territory. But I'm pretty sure those people know someone who lives not too far away in a wet territory, and they can probably have it shipped there.
So we're obviously right in the middle still of the COVID-19 pandemic. The state is experiencing a lot of changes, especially in terms of how much money we're bringing in. We were already struggling. You guys ended up doing a one-year budget instead of a two-year budget. So you'll have to tackle that again in 2021. But the state, even before this pandemic, can use all the money and all the help it can get.
Yes.
So let's talk about this bill and any revenue that it could be expected to bring in. Like, how are the taxes going to work, and how could the state bring in money through this bill?
Well, all these shipments that I mentioned earlier that were going to Ohio or coming in illegally were not being taxed. Actually, I guess they were going to Ohio. They were being taxed, and that money was going to Ohio, for instance. So we don't know exactly how much it's going to bring in, but we know it is going to be more than we're making right now. And that's direct money. You add in the fact that we are opening up Kentucky alcohol to the rest of the world. And those opportunities will create jobs for probably mostly in the bourbon industry, but certainly additional purchases for wine, additional purchases for our brewers, for those who have such a good product that someone's willing to ship a liquid that much of it to wherever they want it, so I think it'll provide a lot of new jobs, which will indirectly provide a lot of revenue, not just to the state, but to the locals. And, if somebody was shipping in something from, say, Napa Valley, again, if they were shipping it to the house, there was no revenue being generated there. So we had to work very hard to figure out how to tax it properly so that we were generating the correct amount of revenue and making it competitive with anybody, who's selling it at home. But in a retail shop, that's going to be very, very rare. I mean, why would you pay to have something shipped from Oregon, Washington, California, if it's available down the street in your local liquor store. So these are products that are 99% of the time not going to be otherwise available in your local liquor store, or else why would you ship Bud Light to your house? I mean, nobody's going to do that. So I think it's just more opportunities and more freedom for our Kentuckians, and it's going to generate revenue directly and indirectly. We just don't know how much yet, but I'm sure we will keep track of it and let everybody know and be very proud of it when we figure it out.
Absolutely. So just to wrap up, is there anything that we haven't covered that you want people to know? And have you heard any feedback from Kentuckians since this law has passed, and about how, like, if they're excited or anything about from either side?
Up in Northern Kentucky here, obviously our folks are kind of excited about the prospect of shipping stuff to Kentucky rather than to Ohio or Indiana. And otherwise, the only feedback I've heard is, you mean we can't do it yet, even though it's legal? So I think there'll be a lot of pent-up demand, and hopefully we can get it done before Christmas, and people can start ordering Christmas gifts for their family members this way.
All right. Well, Representative Koenig, thank you so much for talking to me about this bill today, and I'm sure we will have more to chat about soon. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.